Hi there, I'm Mark and welcome to Book Ramble. And this one is about this fella. Well, not so much his plays. It's really just about an introduction to this book. This book's quite old. You can tell because I went into a thrift shop. The reason I went into a thrift shop, so I stumbled across this beast. It's huge. And I'm so glad I found it, and I doing notes to John. It's taken so long, and the reason being is because it's one you can hardly pick up. It's just sits on the desk, and the thought of picking it up and putting it on the lap or taking it off somewhere to read was just too much. Although saying that, when I come to do John shortly, I'll be using that book. So I went out and got this. And I've had to do repairs already because it's old. And in fact, I think it was originally from South Africa, because doesn't that mean 45 rand? I think it does. And it's wonderful. Bit of little colour. In fact, Shakespeare there looks like he's got a black eye. But there you go. This is about 1948, and it must have been kept in some damp place because there's a lot of mould. But there's this piece, The Growing and Perpetual Influence of Shakespeare, and that's what I'm going to be referring to. But rather than keep looking at the book, I'm going to refer to notes. So before I start, in this piece, about 3/4 of the way in, is a little statement that I think deserves to be said first before I get going. And it's this: in one element of his genius or another, there may have been poets, nay, there have been poets, who equalled or excelled Shakespeare. But in the moral element of his genius, he stands alone, in a sort of inspired grandeur. All poets, historians, speculative thinkers, ethical writers, have not together more fully comprehended man than has Shakespeare. I would argue Plato would have. The most living and complete moral philosophy in literature is that of Shakespeare. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm new to Shakespeare. Well, I'm not new. I was in a school play of Tempest. I remember it vividly. Wonderful. I went out and saw a school play, although I can't remember what that play was. This was in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. I've seen King Lear, and I've seen a couple others. Never been to the Globe. But we're planning to go to the UK in October, September, October, for the wife's birthday, taking the grandson and my daughter. And while we're in London, we're hoping to go along the South Bank and visit the Globe. I'm not going to see if it's a play on or get tickets. I'm happy just to walk by. But he's been there in the background. But I've really resisted reading him. And I think it's because I got this false conception of what he was about. Because I love history, the thought that when I think of once more into the breach, dear friends, it's okay, but I kept thinking, how historically accurate is that? And blah, 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 blah. But that's not the point. It's an emotional history. I've only just recently got that. But regardless of what I think, Shakespeare is perpetually famous and influential. So on my phone here, went into the drama department, doing a relief. Don't think you can see it. Things we say today which we owe to Shakespeare. And it's just amazing. Knock knock, who's there? In a pickle. Laughing stock. What's done is done. Seen better days. Dead as a doornail. They're all from Shakespeare. Heart of gold. Good riddance. Break the ice. Wild goose chase. That is how influential Shakespeare is. And recently I've done videos expressing or just reading out like Jacques' 7 Ages of Man, Hamlet's soliloquy. Doing that and then putting images to it, it's just helped me really appreciate the flow and the rhythm of the language. It's amazing. And that meter, the iambic pentameter. And when I was talking to students at school who are looking at Greek plays and Shakespeare. When I was talking about that, you can see their eyes lighting up. And I would imagine I would have been the same. Or if somebody came and talked into my ear, said, yeah, but da-da-da-da-da. I thought, oh, right. That's where I'm at. I'm still learning. Better late than never. So, what does this, just the initials FJ, whoever that is, this is what he, and I assume it's an E, states. First of all, Shakespeare, he is the great unknown. It's amazing. Before I started book-ramble, I read a piece about Shakespeare, and it was written in the 19th century, and it was about, or it hypothesized, there was no Shakespeare. It's a conceit. There is no evidence that he ever lived. What we do know of the Shakespeare, he would have been a yokel. How could he have written such things? And so on and so forth. And I think I may have been too overly coloured or influenced by that. And one of them was, how could he write so well for men and women? It must be different plays. So that when I looked at The Tempest, I actually said that. Was this written by a woman? He is the great unknown. And why should that be a problem? Why do we need to know everything about Shakespeare to say whether he lived or wrote these at all? We have a group of work in which it's accredited to be Shakespeare, and that is enough. And that took me years to come to that conclusion. So moving on. According to this piece, what makes him so influential is his subjective completeness. Other poets have one characteristic faculty or attribute. Shakespeare cannot narrow itself into this partial emphasis. The conception of Shakespeare's genius cannot be connoted or denoted. He stands apart from everyone else. And he has a completeness. So I'm reading John. John is believed to be certainly his first history. Yet there's a character in there who is so superbly written that even at the very get-go, he was showing something here. That by the time we get to The Tempest, he's just rattling off all this stuff with ease. So yeah, I do agree with that. Next one, his imagination. Fierce and dark, sportive, gladsome, it's a word we don't use so much now, bright, full of tricks, gaiety and wiles. And of course this is indicative of when this was written. Grotesque, serious, superstitious, quaint, finding in life but a comedy of oddities, peopling all existence with spirits, goblins, and strange appearances. An amazing imagination that, when you consider the scope of topics in which Shakespeare covers, it's just amazing. He was writing at a period in time of the Tudors and then into James I. So there was this, obviously, desire to look back to the old kings and queens of old. It's amazing. The people that would have been known to the audience at the time, the Falstaffs of this world, and so on. The soul of beauty and the soul of hideousness, the soul of goodness, the soul of evil, of joy, fear, of gentleness, and of force. Amazing. Next, and let's not be too coy here, it's his intellect. It's an amazing intellect, and very deep intellect as well. It's abstract, speculative, he's a philosopher. He thinks of the origin of things, on the nature of existence, the destiny of man, a singer and dreamer of the ideal. He's a logician and a polemic of the actual. Because they're not my words. I wouldn't write it like that. He's a keen critic of manners. He looks at humanity only in society. Never alone. It's always talking with somebody else coming in. There are soliloquies, but there's always people around. The most sordid conditions of life, of ignorance and poverty, with all their vices, their sufferings, their struggles, their toils, and a lot of satire. He's not just focusing on one group of people. I did the Beau Stratagem, which was definitely from a different era, and it was more about a comedy of manners, men and women, but it was a certain group of people. Now, for all I know, Farquhar wrote other people as well, but nothing to the extent of what Shakespeare wrote. Another one is fancy. Now, this means something different now, and I'm just going to read it from the book. He's sick with the love of beauty, the most florid fancy, voluptuous and luxurious imagery, elfish wood and valley, but he'll also have the barest landscapes. Amidst the mountains, looking to the stars, along the enchanted stream, the chorus of the waves, song of thought and beauty, its weird and dreamy music, murmurs of human emotion, fantasies of mind, the pleasures of hope, description. He sings of war and peace. The one I'm really drawn to is the feminine element. There's a lot to say here. What makes Shakespeare so immortal in literature? No genius that deals with human life is complete without including both the masculine and the feminine elements. One away from the other does not unfold its own fullest nature. Each by itself is not only barren, but stunted. The genius which includes them both and develops both is like those plants that have the two sexes in the same flower. But let's be honest, okay, you've got to know that this is of a different era, and I think although this came out in 1948, I would not be surprised if this was written much earlier. Because he writes, mere emotion and sympathy in women, separate from sound thinking, leaves her a simpleton or a sentimentalist. Mere intellect in man, separate from sensibility and intuition, leaves him surly cynic or a reasoning machine. But we can hardly tell which is the more intolerable, a lachrymose man or a logical woman. Okay. Alright, it's a different era. But without the sympathy of woman, no literature that deals with humanity can be said to live. It's amazing how he writes for women. The subtlety and the thoroughness with which Shakespeare has comprehended the nature of woman is one of the profoundest secrets of his genius. Another one is personalities, the incarnations of character. We see them as being real, even though they may be written quite perfunctorily, like Jacques is hardly in the play. Prospero is as little within an earthly population as the island of his necromancies is within the bounds of earthly geography. Yet, we do verily accept him as one of our human kindred, though we detest Caliban. Don't know about that, I actually quite like Caliban. It shows how mystically and livingly the poet has knit him to our humanity. The speculative Hamlet is almost as far away from the path of common men as if he belonged to another sphere, but he too has such hold upon our inward nature, thoughtful and spiritual. The mind embraces him as a brother. Macbeth could no more belong to the actual world than the speculative Hamlet. Yet he's made real, and by our own instincts, superstitions and desires, we feel that inwardly we are of his kindred. And the comic characters are fully as ideal as his tragic ones, as removed from ordinary fact and yet as true to human nature. We see them within us. No such social wit as Falstaff ever existed or ever will exist. No such warrior and orator as Ancient Pistol. No such municipal officer as Dogberry. No such glorious cheat and thief as a magnificent Autolycus. Yet, these are in themselves consistent and complete. Yeah, I think I agree with that one. The penultimate thing that makes him abidingly influential is the stages of life that he talks about. I mean, obviously we've got Jacques. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honour, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair, round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe, and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. And he talks about all classes of men and women, whatever be the contrarieties among men, in thought or theory, in speech or imagery, in history or culture, in training, habits, manners or beliefs, the sense of right and wrong is common to them all, and certain fundamental convictions of that sense are equally as common. And the final one is the moral nature, which I talked about at the beginning. And according to this particular introductory piece, it's the key to the whole of human nature. That which before had been dark and blank is filled with light and meaning. I think if anything I have learned, and I cannot remember being told this when I was at school, and I'm yet still formulating whether it is in fact true, but it appears that what Shakespeare does with every one of his characters, we meet them when we first come across them, but by the end of the play, if we've had one or two scenes with them, they'll be different. They will change. Now, in The Tempest, that's definitely the case, and I think it's the Two Gentlemen of Verona and The Merchant of Venice. That is true. And that is a skill. It really is. There's the inward struggles, mental griefs, troublous thinkings, uneasy doubts, the problem of existence, the meaning of life, the mystery of death. So, it's a wonderful find just for that one little piece. And it was sitting on a shelf in someone's house until they decided to pass it on. I happened to come across it by chance. I talked to the lady in the shop and said, "Have you got anything like this on Shakespeare?" I explained why. This had just come in. It was falling apart. I got it very, very cheap, a couple of dollars. And it's got all of Shakespeare in there. So an amazing thing to consider. Why is it that I went out my way to find that book? And I'm very pleased to find it. Shakespeare I don't fully get. Don't think I ever will. I don't think anybody does. We touch the surface because there's so much. You can do people have done a whole lifetime just studying this. And I would imagine as well, the one thing that I lack is I've never acted per se Shakespeare. In fact, I was asked in response to one of my, I think it was Jacques, have I ever been on the stage? No, I never have. And perhaps that's why I'm drawn to it, because I'm naturally, as my wife and daughter will tell you, theatrical. And I think finding Shakespeare, although it took me 50 odd years, I'm glad that it happened. I met a guy years ago. He worked on building sites and he was rough. I mean, this guy was hard as nails. Hardly ever spoke. And when he did speak, he would use very simple language. I don't think he ever put anything with more than 3 or 4 syllables in any one sentence ever. Where some people would talk whole paragraphs, he would talk a sentence at the most. Yet he loved Shakespeare. He could quote so many obscure passages. Shakespeare is for everyone. He was for the common person of old. I think what we have done is intellectualize him perhaps too much as time has gone on. We uphold him as some kind of reverence because obviously the language has changed. If he wrote now, in common parlance, forgive me for saying that, the language of the streets, 300-400 years, people would find it out there. Because language changes. So much theatricality around him. It has surprised me. It surprised me that I found him and I've responded to him. And I wonder if that was the whole point of doing this channel then, for me to do that. Someone up there wanted me to get in line with Shakespeare, so thank you. So I'm interested to know what you think. Is Shakespeare the kind of genius that is made out in that book? Do you agree? Would you add anything else? And I'd be interested to develop that conversation very much so, because I'm going to do more and more Shakespeare moving forward. I think it's just fantastic. I'm convinced that there was a scene in Star Trek where the Klingon said Shakespeare was a Klingon. So there have to be similar kind of poets that I'm not aware of in other languages. Hopefully I'll find them too. privily, ta-ta for now.